just to introduce the panelists, we've got quite a great panel. Don Bartusiak, and I'm doing this alphabetically, by the way. Don Bartusiak has been a thought leader and tireless champion of the open automation systems and continues to be instrumental in development of the Open Process Automation System Standard, OPAS, which had been mentioned earlier by Marcus. Don is currently president of Austin, Texas-based Collaborative System Integration, providing system integration services and software products for open process automation systems. Not a surprise. Don's industry experience is over 33 years in process control with ExxonMobil and 7 years of process development research with Bethlehem Steel. Next, I mentioned, well, Dieter has already spoken, co-founder and CEO of CODESYS, has been dedicated to open standards in 1131 since the company founded in 1994. And I think we've pretty well covered the company already in his remarks. Next is Jose Rivera. He's CEO of the Control System Integrator Association, a not-for-profit global trade association with over 500 member companies in 35 countries dedicated to advancing the professionalism of control system integrators. The association helps members improve their business skills, share industry expertise, promotes the benefit of hiring a certified control system integrator. In particular, they have a validation process for certifying professional control system integrators. It's been a great addition to the industry. Prior to this position, Jose has had a global career in the automation industry, working with Siemens, Emerson Electric, Schneider Electric in 6 different countries, and is fluent in multiple languages. Albert Reuters is next, and he is founder and chief executive officer and chief technology officer of Bedrock Automation, which provides cyber-secure industrial control systems. Albert believes industrial control systems must be designed and built from the ground up to protect industrial facilities and infrastructure, opposed to using bolt-on cybersecurity methods that are just overlays on existing systems. And that's been the mission and what Bedrock has been accomplishing with their products. Albert has over 35 years of process control and electronics industry experience and holds more than 100 patents in electronics, human interface, mechanical design, system design, and cybersecurity. And last but not least, Brandon Williams, that's what happens when you have a W at the end of your name when we go alphabetically, is a co-founder. Pardon?
That's my whole life.
Yeah, okay. As a co-founder of the Silicon Valley software company Seaplane AI, dedicated to providing software for industrial digitalization, converging IT and OT system, very hot topic, based on open standards. He was deeply involved in his company in the development of the open process automation pilot that was done last year to prove a lot of these concepts. Very interesting. You can find a lot of information on that on their website and different articles and things. Their digital infrastructure organization platform really reduces risk and complexity to coordinate automating the provisioning, management, failure recovery, and evolution of digital assets from multiple vendors, which is this new era we're in. He's been an investor and developer of numerous technologies, from water treatment to cloud infrastructure. He's a former nuclear submarine officer and holds an MBA in operations from Wharton School, which we won't hold that against him. So just kidding. So anyway, getting on with it. Manufacturing and process automation certainly is clearly changing the efficiency, production, quality, and helping us meet sustainability standards in the now and in the future, which is becoming very important. So I want to start the discussion and kick it off, but just remind you as we go on, please enter your questions in the Q&A part of the Zoom platform, because we'd like to respond to those. But I want to start by having each panelist briefly provide thoughts on the top 2 or 3 changes in automation they foresee in the future, and top 2 or 3 challenges automation users will face in the future. So let's start with Don Bartusiak. Don, what's your thoughts on those kind of 2 points?
Just some thoughts, Bill, and I'm honored to be with this panel. Good morning, everybody. So on what changes that I see coming, the first one I'd like to highlight would be an expansion of scope of, of what we can influence in process control and automation. So expansion beyond kind of controlling the chemical process or controlling the manufacturing process itself. I think the trends that we're seeing now about expanding into like predictive maintenance, for example, is an example of that expansion of scope that I'm talking about. I think we're going to start to see automation addressing the human factors and the causes of human errors. I think an example like in autonomous vehicles, there's a story and there's learnings to be derived there. And the whole, what the industrial Internet of Things means. I mean, so that's going to be a major change. I think the second thing that I would highlight is a technology paradigm shift. I think with traditional process control algorithms, of which model predictive control and real-time optimization are the exemplars of, at least in continuous process. We're going to see a shift towards artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies. That's going to be a big change that we're going to be sailing into in the immediate and near term. And I guess the last thing in terms of changes is the technology and business transformations towards open architecture-based control and automation systems. And again, probably the business changes are the more challenging relative compared to the technical ones. So they're the three things that I would cite: an expansion of scope, new technologies, and basically business transformation in the automation business ecosystem. If I can switch then, Bill, to your second category of questions, the top challenges for users. I guess the one that I'd like to cite first, and this isn't going to be a business bottom line one. I'll hit business bottom line challenges, but the one I want people to remember hearing from me first is users really need to understand and become more assertive in talking about their pain points that really should motivate the type of transformation that I talked about when I talked about the changes. Bill, you wrote that really great editorial a couple of years ago. I can't remember exactly what you called it, compliance of the victims.
Compliance of the victim.
Compliance of the victims. I mean, that's really what I'm talking about. And it really, the users can't sit passively and just accept the pain that they're experiencing. So I don't want to turn this session, I can detail this later. I don't want to go into the litany of the pain points that end users should be motivating end users to demand for change. But that's probably the thing I would cite as a challenge for users first, to become more assertive at demanding change. Where I'd like to go next, however, is what's the business, what's the business motivation for the users? Well, with control and automation, it's always been, competitive advantage. And I think in this day and age, the challenge to the users is to be ahead of the pack with this broad concept of digital transformation. And so you can put the big buzzwords over top of this, Industry 4.0, IIoT, OT/IT convergence. I mean, that ultimately for end users is to stay competitive. You need to be ahead of the pack as this digital transformation thing happens, which means you're going to have to accept some risk. You're going to have to try things that aren't proven with 1 million operating hours of experience. And that's really the challenge to the end users. And I guess the last thing, just to close out my opening comments, Bill, a challenge for the end users is to really be bold enough to go after step change improvements in productivity and step change reductions in total cost of ownership of systems by really pursuing the open architecture concepts and the open process automation idea. So that's a summary of my sense of the top few things for changes and challenges for the users.
Thanks, Don. That's terrific. And the compliance of the victim article I wrote really was because of Don. I have been in the industry for so many years, gone to different conferences, heard people quietly complain on the side about things. But Don was the first one carrying the banner and really bring it to the forefront, speaking at events, talking about these pain points and the importance of change. And that's what prompted creating that article, Compliance of the Victim. It just struck me hard at that point. We've been complaining, but you're a victim unless you do something about it. So thank you, Don. So let's, Dieter, interested in your views on these 2 points.
Yeah, so you asked us for changes and challenges. So I see a big change that software and hardware will become independent. I mean, we see this development in other areas like mobile phones or servers. It's no question that software and hardware is different or comes from different vendors. And I think this is very, very important, but it's also a challenge because everyone is used that it comes in one package, and in the first on the first side, maybe it looks more complicated to install a piece of software on your PLC right after you started it. But on the long term, of course, it's a big advantage because you can just choose the best-in-class product to run on your PLC. So this is a very important, and of course, obviously, it's also very important for our company, and we think it's very it will bring a lot of improvements for end users. Of course, the other thing is that IT and OT grow together. I think sometimes people think IT will replace parts of OT. I think personally it will be a good extension for additional tasks. I think it's quite difficult to really to do classical OT things in an IT environment, but of course you can do a lot of very, very useful things in a private cloud or even in a public cloud. The main challenges is to bridge the difference in mentality between IT and OT. So, for example, the awareness for availability and real time is not so in OT. You think if something waits for half a second, it's not a problem. But of course, if you control a machine, it's a problem to wait a millisecond too long or 4 milliseconds too long. So it's really important. On the other hand, if we start to open automation systems to OT technology, the OT people have to become aware of security issues, for example, or of software layers, and not look for saving a few bits or bytes of memory. Because if you don't do that, you're so close to your hardware that you cannot take any advantage of the new technology. Yeah, and then of course it's also a question that everyone learns what the additional possibilities brings, what opportunities the additional technology brings. And my impression is that most people just think, okay, artificial intelligence. I can use it for predictive maintenance, but of course it's not all. I mean, we are right now in a project where we try to optimize the configuration of a TSN network using artificial intelligence. You can use it for optimizing control loop. So there are so many possibilities, and I think it's important to go beyond just these bullet points and really explore the possibilities which come with the conversion, the conversion, which comes with the use of IT and OT together in a integrated system. Yeah, that's from my point the main changes and challenges.
Excellent. You know, you might mention IT and OT, and I, having been around a long time in different systems at different levels, to me, that's becoming a very imprecise way of defining things. It's like too compartmentalized. People like to talk about the IT, OT, IT versus OT. So maybe there's another term here at some point we're getting to. So Jose, let's hear your thoughts on these issues.
Hi, Bill, and thank you for having me on this panel. It has been very interesting listening to all this opinion. What I would say in terms of changes in automation, and I like to start from the human perspective, I think that we all have seen new possibilities brought to us by all the technology around our cell phone, iPads, and these devices. And I think that there has been a change because in the past, a long time, you know, the technology was coming from the employer. Now it's really coming from the consumer. And so the worker is now trying to bring all these opportunities to the workplace. And this has been a little bit of a challenge, and I'll address that when it comes to the challenges that we face. But these possibilities of combining and going beyond just the manufacturing line or the process and extending to include the supply chain, the human elements that Don Bartusiak was mentioning, that is the real opportunity, which is what some coin as the digital transformation, right? So we're breaking, and you were uncomfortable with having two buckets only, IT, OT, and a lot of people are uncomfortable with silos that are put in. And this digital transformation is enabling transformation by viewing things in different ways. So that requires people to view things differently, and then also the system to be able to communicate and bring the information about. And that is already a big challenge. And the other part that I will say is that some of the tools remain complex. You know, that it's a mystery, a lot of the artificial intelligence, and I know that we have Brandon here on the panel, but it's a little bit of like a mystery, and it's also a challenge to implement. I think that I see going and getting easier to implement. When we go back to the history of our control systems and take a look at the DCSs, how they moved to have graphic interfaces where you put your process, you connect it, and it's so much easier than just talking machine language, etc. So all of this has been the evolution. And what I see for challenges for the end users, I would start with the war for talent, because that affects everybody. And if you are an end user, manufacturer, process industry, you are fighting now with everybody to get your talents. And so that will force you to rely more on automation and an ecosystem of providers for automation. I represent an association of control system integrators, and they are the specialists. They are able to bring the talent that will focus on the integration related topics, and they implement that throughout different customers. So that is a way to cope with the war for shortage of talent. The other thing, Don mentioned, that is the challenge of these proprietary legacy systems. So if we need to change, and it's step change, and we need to do it fast, as we just witnessed with all this COVID and all the supply chain disruptions that force a lot of companies to change very quickly. And if your systems are hard to upgrade, that is a big limitation to the competitiveness of your company and of our country. So that needs to change. And this is what many like OPAF petition for, but I saw the same discussion recently at FabTech with the robotics people. They want to be able to buy best in class for the different functions. And today that is not as open as it could be and should be. And the last thing that I want to mention is that for the particular case of the United States, the installed base of automation that we have is very, very old. And it's, I think, troubling because some of this infrastructure is running critical processes, chemical plants, all these things. I think we have not given, as a society, the importance to make this migration happen. Thank you.
Hey, great. Good points. And even Don brought up competitiveness. I think Dieter actually mentioned that as well. And I've come to the conclusion that nobody can compete on low labor costs anymore. We're seeing that around the world. And we've got the skill shortage. We just won't have the people available. So we've got to invest in automation to be competitive wherever you are in the world. Very good. Well, never to be just a quiet wallflower, I'd like to have Albert give his thoughts. We've known each other for a long time. I've known all of you guys a long time, with the exception of maybe Brandon. Thank you.
Can you hear me, Bill?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent. Well, it's a real thrill to be here. Thank you so much. The advantage I have is that I'm founder, CEO, CTO of a technology company, Bedrock Automation, that built a control system architecture based on basically a mirror of the premise of OPA. So we're at the tip of the spear, and we understand in real time what the good and the bad and the ugly is. So that's good. So I would say, from my perspective, I think of 5 C's to make it easy. These are the factors of automation that I think are shaping the present and the future. First one is consolidation, which to me means simplicity, consolidation of architecture, consolidation of software, consolidation of tools. The second one is connectivity, which is critical to legacy infrastructure. How do you bring older technologies into a modern, secure infrastructure and connect it effectively? So connectivity is the issue. Cloud is really the thing. And as Dieter mentioned, cloud is a concept and a set of tools. And he said, private, public cloud. I think that there's a lot of interesting things going on when the evolution at the edge where there's so much horsepower and capabilities, the fundamentals that are required to have cloud applications and cloud functionality right at the edge is really there today. And the fourth is cyber, which is cybersecurity. And the fifth is cost. Now, they're not really in order of importance, because cost, I think, is the number one driver that automation companies and automation suppliers need to think of. And from my perspective, what I say is everything we do, we must drive cost to zero. And of course, in certain cases, you're not going to get there. And some business person would say, well, how can I run a business if I drive cost to zero? I say, don't sweat it, because the markets are so huge. You drive it to zero, and as close as you can get it, that means you're going to win. You're going to succeed. And so cyber is really the most relevant element on this, because I hear this phrase digital transformation, but digital implies software, which implies cyber, which implies cyber risk. And so it really should be the cyber secure digital transformation, or else you are expanding your digital footprint, you're expanding your cyber attack vectors, and you're expanding your cyber risks and your cyber costs. If you look at the sort of the life cycle of cost, the elements of life cycle cost, maybe 5 years ago, cyber wasn't there, but in every customer we're working with, small, medium, and large, cyber is a component of life cycle cost. And so as you digitally transform without, rhyme or reason, you are actually increasing your cyber costs for your life cycle if it's not done right. And so the other element is obsolescence. And obsolescence historically has been the most expensive element in life cycle cost. I don't think that's true anymore. for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of the technology that's out there installed is already decades old and could, for the most part, run for decades more. And all new and good technologies today, automation technologies, will last for decades when they're properly purchased and maintained. So it's, in many cases, it'll be the processes and the verticals that will obsolete before the technology obsoletes. So obsolescence is not as important in capital infrastructure. What's more important is cyber, because cyber, the risks of cyber to digital systems, and let's say, again, we say digital transformation, virtually all automation, whether your PLCs and RTUs and DCS, it's already digital. It's already digital. So where are you going from digital to digital? What the heck does that really mean? So cyber has, in one effect, has obsoleted these technologies to do what they're supposed to do, because cyber risk has now been imparted into the equation. So it's all about cyber if you're talking digital. It's all about driving costs to zero. And that's really, it's about the cost, because almost every user is basically making a commodity, which means competition, margin, and prices are what drive everything. And so the cost of automation, people don't buy automation for the love of automation. They buy it for the means to the end, which is to make their commodity. So costs must go down. Dieter and CODESYS are proving that that is true. And their model, their software model, they're going to win. They're the Tesla of software, of tools, because they innovate and they drive the cost model to zero. You can bring their tools in, you can engineer and simulate and develop in an open standard tool, and their cost per user is low enough that companies like me, we embed it in the hardware. So the net effect to the user is the cost is zero. And that's a big piece if you bring software cost to zero. So those are my, key points. And as you know, Bill, when I get started, I can't stop talking. So I must.
We've had many, with a number of you have had many late night discussions in the wee hours about these things. Cybersecurity cost is, I've seen a lot of different analysis, and it's coming more to the forefront. But one of the tricky parts of it is a lot of, and this is based on people's analysis they've done, a lot of companies are not willing to discuss losses they had from cybersecurity, particularly if they're public companies, which to some extent, it's a much bigger problem than is apparent, right? A lot of the iceberg is below the water for people. So it's been interesting to watch.
Yeah. And I think the other half of your question I wanted to quickly answer. And I said, what is the issue for the users? I agree somewhat to Jose's comment that it's the war for talent. That's pretty true. But if you look at the new generation of, the millennials and others, they are very digitally astute. I see that in my own kids. They do things with their digital devices I could never dream of doing. And it's just intrinsic in their nature. So I'm not so much worried about them to be able to develop the comfort level with the digital world. Because underlying it all, it's the first term of consolidation, that's simplicity. People don't want complicated tools. They want to just use automation and systems to evolve and operate as simple as your iPhone or other applications like that. So I'm not so worried about that. And I do think that there will be massive consolidation and layoffs in certain industries. So there might be a wealth of talent out there. What I think is the bigger problem is for users to sort of work through the noise of the marketplace. There's too much marketing dollars spent. There's too many ideas floating around there, and too much, pressure for them to do this or do that, and to stay fast and think carefully and buy carefully, invest carefully in automation. And that's, I think, one of their challenges.
Absolutely. There is a lot of hype, and always trying to sort out the hype from reality is always a tricky business. But we're fortunate there's so much new technology helping to make things easier. Who would have thought my grandparents would be doing making web pages with Facebook, right? So it's interesting. Well, last but not least is Brandon. Let's hear your views, Brandon. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's hard to follow this crowd. This is but I'm happy to try, and I do come from a very different perspective. So. As you can see over my shoulder, we're based here in Silicon Valley. And we participated in the transformation of the telecom industry as well as the cloud industry, and have seen firsthand the incredible power of open systems and new businesses, new opportunities that have been created. So instead of just focusing on fixed line telecommunications, there's now just an ocean of new things that have been made possible by these transformations, like Netflix and all these Google and all these other companies. So we've had a front row seat to that and participated in that. And when we got involved in industrial, we were focusing on edge computing. In fact, it was actually the head of IoT for McKinsey and Company that said, look, edge computing is great, it's big, but smart cities and retail, smart retail and self-driving cars, those are a long way off. So you need to focus on industrial, because industrial has real problems, they have real money, and they have real ROI behind that. And so 4 years ago, we got involved in open process automation. And quite frankly, we had to learn, right? A lot of what's been said here is that, IT and OT are different, and they are. The mindsets are different. The legacy is different. For any IT operators, or vendors that are watching this, you cannot just come in and back up your truck and unload a bunch of technology. That's not how this market works. The OT side of the business is not going to go away. For one thing, the buyers are plant operators and managers, and that's just not going to change, as well as the operators. The operators might have new technology underneath, but the processes and manufacturing that they're participating in, that they're critical, have to be accessible to the same workforce. And so what we've experienced is the preeminence of the OT side, the OT ethos for safety, reliability, security. Those kinds of things are not going to change. And so that's been a very steep learning curve for us and for our team. My background, being trained in the operation and maintenance and design of nuclear reactors and all of the systems, as Don will tell you, made me dangerously knowledgeable in the shallowness of my depth, but it did give me a context to really appreciate a lot of the manufacturing, and so that's actually helped us out a lot. So because we come from Silicon Valley and maybe have a different perspective on things, I'm afraid I'm going to echo what a lot of others have said, but maybe provide some new insight, maybe not. But the top changes, which has been said multiple times, is that the movement from proprietary systems to open systems, right? And that's not just the separation of hardware and software, but it's there's my co-founder calling me. Excuse me. And that was a sonar ping. I don't know if you heard that. That's my ringtone.
Yeah, I thought we're going to dive soon.
That's right. That's right. You'll see somebody Periscope right here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Okay, so but the movement from proprietary to open systems, and that's not just new software running on proprietary systems. That's the whole architecture, and we've seen this transformation, very significant ways, and it's unbelievably powerful. The second thing I'd mention in changes is the just to align yourself, the increasing importance of software and computer algorithms in every aspect of manufacturing and operations, right? It's not just efficiency and security, which we've talked about here, but I would emphasize profitability. I think driving cost to zero, Albert, and in all respect, is one model, but I think that manufacturers are saying, how can it be more profitable with the investments, assets, operations that I have? And I think software is the key to that. And CODESYS is an important part of that, which is why we've learned a lot from them. And AI and machine learning, if you have the control system where you can bring that in and put it in a real-time relationship with the data, and actually have the horsepower to run it, we're going to discover a lot of new things and a lot of new ways to increase profitability for manufacturing. So that's we're on the cusp of that kind of breakthrough. So those are the changes that I see. In terms of challenges, again, I'm just echoing what other people have said, but the decreasing reliability of supply chains is an opportunity for manufacturers in every industry if you're flexible enough to respond. And that kind of flexibility is intrinsic to all the things that I've mentioned before, open systems and advanced software and the ability to make changes. And that's not how our economy, our manufacturing economy has run for the last 30 or 40 years, but that's a new thing. And so the supply chain, COVID, whatever it is geopolitics, it's going to drive and reward those that are able to be flexible. Cybersecurity, again, bringing a different perspective is that manufacturing systems, control systems, are now on equal footing with, with all of the IT systems in terms of the cyber threat, right? Even if you try to air gap your systems or, hide it behind firewalls, et cetera, it's no longer a different kind of threat. It's part and parcel with the general cybersecurity threat. And the reason that's important is that you have to be able to continually update your tools, your defenses, to deploy new ways to detect, new ability to respond, for your control system to actually adapt in real time to a perceived or sensed cybersecurity threat. And, that's a never-ending battle. So you have to build in not just cybersecurity in day zero, but the ability to continue to evolve that over time, because that threat is not going down, and it's dynamic, and will continue to be dynamic. And the last thing I'd mention in terms of changes is, again, Jose, you really made excellent points about this, about attracting and training new talent. The only emphasis I would put on that, it's, yes, my children, all have interacted with technology, if it's an iPhone or the web or whatever it is, in different ways. But if you think about tools right now that are being used, you use a web browser to configure, control systems. And the reason isn't, maybe the web browser is more efficient, but that's just the way workers relate to technology now. And if you give them a command line, or if you give them a green screen or even a USB fob, it's just not as intuitive. And so you have to continue to evolve to attract talent, to give them the tools and the ways of interacting with technology that they can relate to. Otherwise, and I have many good friends who have made a lot of money being COBOL programmers, that are in their 60s and they have great job security, but industrial manufacturers don't want to end up in that position. Think about Y2K, where suddenly they don't have the talent to adapt to a new set of challenges. And so the evolution to software-based solutions, to open systems, is also hand in hand with addressing and recruiting talent. So that is all tightly coupled in my mind. And so I'll leave it at that. Again, just frankly reiterating what this panel has already said. So
very good. It's interesting. The transition we talk about, IT, OT, automation, but I kind of really come to the view we're trying to have an integrated manufacturing business, whether it's discrete or process, including supply chain, which Jose in particular pointed out, as an integrated operation. And it's not that many years ago, I was working on some MES things and working with a very bright ERP industry expert. And I asked him why people started getting interesting in the plant floor. And he said, because ERP, and a lot of us are old enough to remember MRP, MRP2, then ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning Systems. They kept evolving till they squeezed as much as they could out of creating new efficiencies. And the plant floor was like kind of the last bastion, the last place to go or warfront, which is interesting. I thought that was an interesting perspective. You know, the other thing, I've been doing a lot of, and I do this with articles I write too, looking back. And when I studied people like Henry Ford and Dale Carnegie and Steele, if you go a little deeper into what they did, they were innovators adopting technologies, not what we see as technologies today. When you look at it now, you kind of say, well, that was old stuff. They were starting to adopt, but they were early adopters in a lot of different technologies. You know, people tend to look at the silver bullet, the one thing they did that made things happen, but it's never a single silver bullet. It's a systems problem or a systems approach to things overall.
Frederick Taylor.
Frederick Taylor, yeah.
Yeah.
You're reading Taylor for Taylor Instruments?
Well, Frederick Taylor and Taylorism,
Time motion studies,
the time motion studies, and implementing those in the steel industry and in, you know, for Ford. And they were his disciples, you know, Ford and Carnegie were his disciples in transforming those industries. And it's, I mean, that's exactly what's happening in digital systems today, Bill. I mean, that's, you know, you are implementing systems that give you a material advantage, right? Like when Ford launched the Model T, I don't remember, there's like 600 or 300 automobile manufacturers.
Right.
And within 20 years, given there was the Great Depression, or 15 years, there was like 11 manufacturers, or 19 or 20 or something. It's a just tremendous change because of those systems that you're talking about.
Yeah, I did,
you know,
put that in some articles.
Sorry.
No, it went from hours to like 90 minutes in production. It was just phenomenal. The statistics, the KPIs, as we would call them today, right? Go ahead.
What I was saying is, if you want to make another link to history, you go back to Deming with quality.
Yeah.
And you can link it to digital transformation, because quality was no longer just an output of, you know, a control tower or something. It was the factory floor people that at Toyota pulled the red cord, they stopped the production line, got together, fixed the problem at the root cause, right? So you were empowering the operator. And if you bring it now to digital transformation, the idea is not to make it lights out automation. The idea is to provide more tools to the factory worker to make better decisions, right? And so I think, just like you're saying, there's never a single idea. It's like several ideas that are adopted, are transformed and utilized to meet different goals. So I think it's fascinating, you know, like reviewing how we have done these things in the past too.
Excellent. Very good. Well, here I have a question that came up here. This whole talent labor shortage, do we need to concentrating on finding talent, or how do we develop our talent, or bring in talent? Do we need to develop them?
Well, can I address
And how?
that, Bill?
Yeah, please.
Well, one thing that I see happening is, you know, industries that aren't embracing digital technologies really are not very appealing to the very people that they need to affect that digital, the digitalization. So you're going to, you know, people like young people coming out of college, you know, the end user companies have to show an appealing career perspective for people who are math oriented, who are computer and communications oriented, or they're all just going to go to the tech companies. And so that's the real challenge. It's you know, you have to embrace the way of work. Like Albert said, the young people are digital natives. I mean, we use that term. You have to give them a workplace that they can feel productive in the same way that they interact with their friends. And if you're a manufacturing company and you don't do that, you're not going to get the talent you need to survive. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah, some of the you know, the young hires that we've had in the past, you know, few years, you know, you need a blend of old and new, and you need several generations. Like we have people that are on our team that are, you know, in their 70s and in their 60s and all the way down into their 20s. you need this mix and match of the wisdom and of the sort of historical perspective of automation, in addition to the young talent that are, basically digitally astute. When you put them together, and a young person that may be a double E or a computer science degree or something, you show them the fundamentals of PID control and process automation or something, and they freak out over it. They're like, whoa, that is so cool. I didn't know that these kinds of things really work that way. And you can entice them with the fundamentals very easily, because it's hard for people today, young and old, to be in contact with the physics of our world. And operators used to, look at thermometers and twist valves and understand what's going on with the vibration of the pipe and all. And through time, all that evolved, and we separated ourselves further and further away. The primary sense, a couple generations ago, was human sense, and then it's technology sense, and then it's remote sense. So you can bring young, talented people that have certain key tools in a very little time. You can excite them about this industry, regardless whether it's factory automation or process automation. I don't think it's hard. You go find the people. They don't have to be years of experience in this and that. They just need to have a good digital footprint in their head space, and then and they're smart, and they're innovative, and they're flexible. They'll learn anything.
That's a good point. I did have a long talk with somebody that was very successful at doing what we would call digital transformation, and was asking him what was successful. And he had a lot of different, we talked about technology and things, but he said, you know what? I took the old dogs and put them with new dogs. I paired them up.
Absolutely.
Because the new dogs can teach the old dogs new tricks, and the old dogs can teach them what it's all about, and some of the old tricks and help them to avoid the pitfalls that were made in the past, mistakes made in the past. A very strong combination. I thought that was a brilliant concept.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really the problem to combine the abilities of people which are able to create a software architecture with the abilities of people who know how a process works and how a machine works. And it's very strange. I know hundreds of application developers. I know hundreds of software architects and software developers, but I don't really need, maybe I know 3 or 5 people who really can do both. And they are able to create really wonderful results. You cannot believe what they're able to do if you combine both together.
You don't need very many of those, Peter. You don't need.
You're either on the process technology side or on the software technology side.
Yeah.
But in very little cases, you find both together.
But Dieter, isn't it also like an opportunity to not rely on an individual to have both capabilities, but more create like a team approach to this?
Yeah.
It's also putting groups, because I think that, with time, things are going to get more complex, right? So we won't have the Michelangelos and the Leonardo da Vinci's, that were able to cover everything. We will have to rely more and more of having good working teams.
Jose, if I could take, just to take this, I don't want to stretch this analogy too far, but in terms of, and Dieter, to bring out the talent, you need to give them a bigger canvas, right? If you, in the Middle Ages, they're painting little icons, for churches, and then by the Renaissance, it's the Sistine Chapel, and they just have a bigger canvas and they have a broader mandate. And quite honestly, I would say that the move towards modern open systems, with the incredible toolkit, they're not just in the cloud, but the incredible capability of software and compute capability that's coming to open modern control systems is actually going to remove a lot of the barriers to allow these software developers to try new things, to do new things. Jose, you mentioned the difficulty in implementing AI. Well, I got to tell you, give them a a container or a virtual machine inside of a control system and give them access to an OPC UA data flow and, in real time. And then you'll see what they can do, right? And none of that can be done today in proprietary systems. Yeah. And so I would say that it's not looking for the diamond in the rough, somebody that knows how to do both the process and the application development. I think it's actually giving them a bigger canvas and that they can paint on. And I'm sure I've probably abused 3 or 4 analogies here in this parallel, but I think what's going to happen is a bit like the Renaissance when suddenly there's new tools, there's new technologies, new sharing, there's new platforms that are going to unleash a lot of creativity. So.
Also, I would argue that AI is about to play a very, very big role. The cost to teach AI, to teach an algorithm, is dropping dramatically, triple-digit year over year. And in the same way that kids, young people today will, born today may not ever be allowed to drive a car because AI and autonomy will overtake it with 3 orders of magnitude more reliability and safety. Same thing's going to happen in industrial processes. I see lots of amazing AI tools, and these are not mega applications that require supercomputing, because what's happening at the edge around a particular piece of machinery or a pump or something that's rotating or something that's regulating, thousands of lines of code in a learning algorithm, hundreds of thousands of lines of code can run on the computational horsepower of a transmitter. Never mind a controller. You can put a power supply. We have a power supply that has more horsepower than the most powerful DCS in the world today. And it's sitting in a UPS. So there's so much power out there, and that's where small footprint distributed AI algorithms will evolve very exponentially. And then, the operator or the person that's going to make a decision about the reliability of the motor or the safety of a particular instance, they won't be allowed to make those decisions because AI will be, milliseconds of time or microseconds of time ahead of them. So it's not going to matter that much. Some of the stuff that we think is important now is going to go away.
Yeah, that's software. You mentioned a team approach. Oh, go ahead.
I'm done.
The team approach, Brandon in particular. I am involved in a roundtable, a private roundtable of pharmaceutical automation leads from around the world every year. And one of the roundtables, it was about 2 years ago, I guess, pre-COVID. Somebody talked about having data scientists come in from some big consulting firm that tried to do something that was a disaster, a train wreck in their operations. But another company in the roundtable said, hey, we started talking about these issues, and the automation people got together with some of the younger, brighter IT people or software people and basically collaborated and built some application using these kind of tools, things like Albert's mentioning, from some of the cloud providers, and did some amazing things. But that had that fusion of creating that team, right? Somebody who knew how to use those tools, but somebody knew the processes and what some of the problems were. It was really insightful.
Yeah, I've had the same experience, Bill. You need a combination of the data scientists and the domain knowledge. One or the other is not sufficient. I've had the same experience.
But for instances like that, though, for every pump, one pump is a pump. For every reactor, one reactor is a reactor. For every distillation column, one distillation column is a distillation column. And in the free and open world, these tools and these AI algorithms, as they evolve, they're going to be made available instantaneously to other people with the same pump and the same reactor. So you don't need 1,000 different companies trying to train the algorithms. It's going to happen. It's just going to explode. It's going to just completely change everything. And these capabilities, like as an example, cyber analytics, right? There's whole companies that say, I've got this intrusion detection software and all these kind of great things. Pay, spend money and do this. I'm going to big servers, big this, big that, blah, blah, blah. That's That's just not the approach. You have to fragment and bring these costs down to zero, because where the problems exist is where the architecture is. And if it's a highly distributed IoT architecture, you need to understand what's going on at each one of these endpoints. So, we develop the cyber analytics for network monitoring and, alarming and all that stuff. It's right inside the device. It's right where it belongs. And then when it's down there, it's hundreds of lines of code instead of millions of lines of code. And it's free, it's built in. So cyber analytics and these kinds of functionality that's the 90-10, 95-5 kind of rule. You can get 95% of the benefits with 5% of the burden of software and cost. So everything that's happening in software and all these great ideas have to be thought about relative to the architecture. And the architecture is moving to the network, to the internet. I mean, that's everywhere we go, everything we do. It's fragmented, distributed. Even say a DCS application, you got a nice big chunky refinery or something, and you're going to do a brownfield upgrade. You wouldn't, collect into the instrument rooms and so on. The junction box is where a DCN is, and the plant is filled with thousands of DCNs. So it's a network. It's a private network instead of a public network, but then architecturally it's the same. So all the software, the tools, the analytics, the AI, everything, the cybersecurity has to be at each one of those tiny little endpoints. So
and it also has to be able to evolve, right? Each one of those endpoints, has to continually evolve to match the threat. So that and that all life cycle is important.
All of that absolutely, but in all of that evolution, say to evolve to evolve for the application for cyber, whatever. It's software. It's what it is. Software will eat the plant and it will eat automation. And anything that can be SaaS will be software as a service. Now, the only reason why people are not marketing automation as a service is because the acronym sucks. But automation as a service, and is the way to. It's what's going to happen. You have to drive the cost. You have to be able to automate. You have to be able to retrofit with OpEx and not CapEx. And you can do it because the cost of automation will go so low that maintenance, repair, operations budgets and operations expense budgets are going to be what's required to continue to evolve and drive costs down. And automation's number one premise is to ensure the safety and the reliability of the people in the process. So it's a brave new world, man.
Yeah, software, but it's a systems issue because software with solid hardware is together really form the system is important. Anybody that's owned a lousy computer or a lousy cell phone understands you can have great software, but if the hardware is bad, you don't have a good system, right?
I don't get me started on that one, Bill. How much. I'm talking software because it's so relevant, but it is built on the foundation of a completely different hardware model. And
Absolutely.
When I talk about the edge, and you're very familiar with our technology, this is incredibly advanced technology that's sitting at the edge there. That's not your mother's or your father's PLC or kind of control module. It's a completely different animal. And so that is where it all starts. And you need extremely advanced. You think about any successful software platform, any successful automation platform, it's built on an extremely successful hardware. And the companies say, you can look at what Tesla's doing because they're going to dominate the industry because they're so vertically integrated and they're moving at light speed in software because first they're building their own chips, they're building their own platform, they're building their own tools because that's where they know they can get the right software. Then Apple is successful in mobility because it's all intrinsically built into their own chips, their own hardware, their own everything. So that's going to play out in automation as well. Each one of those endpoints have to be built in an entirely different way.
This is a great discussion, a great group of people. We're run out of time here, but and it's terrific. And we've all had conversations together in different areas. But also, I'd like the listeners to know that your profiles are up on the event website. you're available on LinkedIn and things. If they want to carry some of these discussions further, I think they can find you and take care. So thanks, everybody. I'd like to.